The number 42 bus was running late again. I huddled deeper into my worn coat, the December wind cutting through the fabric as easily as the years had worn through my patience. At 68, standing at a bus stop at 5:30 a.m. shouldn't have been my reality. Yet here I was, Martha Reynolds, widow, mother, and apparently, eternal safety net for my only son. My breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as I checked my watch again. If the bus didn't come in the next 5 minutes, I'd be late for the third time this month. Dalton Accounting wasn't a demanding workplace by most standards, but punctuality mattered, especially during year-end closings. "Morning, Mrs. Reynolds," called Terrence, the young medical student who often shared my early morning wait. "Cold one today, isn't it?" "Certainly is," I agreed, grateful for the distraction from my discomfort. "Ready for your finals?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "How's that son of yours doing? Business picked up like he hoped?" The innocent question landed like a barb. "Bradley's doing very well," I replied with practiced brightness. "The business has fully recovered. Best year ever, in fact." What I didn't share was how that recovery had come at my expense. 1 year ago, Bradley's company had faced a cash flow crisis that threatened to topple everything he'd built. Faced with his desperation, I'd done what mothers do. I helped. Not just with the $75,000 from my modest retirement savings, but by selling my reliable Toyota for another $25,000. The sacrifice had seemed temporary when Bradley promised to repay me and replace my car as soon as business picks up. Business had picked up, remarkably so. Yet here I was, still catching the 5:30 a.m. bus, still waiting for both the loan repayment and the replacement car he'd promised. The bus finally arrived, its doors opening with a hydraulic sigh that matched my own. I climbed aboard, swiped my senior transit card, and settled into my usual seat near the front. As we lurched away from the curb, I closed my eyes briefly, mentally calculating the hours until I could return to my small apartment. Work until 2:30, bus home, quick change, then another bus to Bradley and Heather's for Christmas Eve dinner. I'd wrapped their presents weeks ago. Thoughtful personal gifts selected with care despite my limited budget. For Bradley, a first-edition copy of the adventure novel he'd loved as a boy, tracked down through months of patient searching at used bookstores. For Heather, a hand-knitted cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of blue, each stitch worked between bus rides and lunch breaks. For the boys, handcrafted model airplanes like the ones their grandfather had made for Bradley, requiring hours of detailed work that had kept me company during long, lonely evenings. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Balancing it carefully as the bus jolted along, I read Bradley's message. "Mom, could you pick up some cranberry sauce on your way over? Heather forgot, and everywhere near us is sold out. Thanks." No inquiry about how I'd manage this additional errand while relying on public transportation. No acknowledgement that this meant I'd need to carry cranberry sauce on 2 different buses after a full day of work. Just the expectation that I would, as always, find a way to make things easier for them. "Of course," I texted back. "See you at 6. The accounting office was already humming with activity when I arrived, my colleagues deep into year-end reporting. I settled at my desk, pushing thoughts of buses and broken promises aside to focus on the columns of figures before me. Numbers, at least, never disappointed. They balanced or they didn't. No emotional mathematics required. "Martha," my supervisor Gail called around noon, "don't forget you're leaving early today. We've got your desk covered for the holiday week." "Thanks," I smiled, grateful for colleagues who remembered things like early departures for family obligations. "Just need to finish the Harrington reconciliation before I go." "Excited for Christmas with your son?" she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "Bradley doing well these days?" "Very well," I answered, the response now automatic. "His business is thriving." "That's wonderful," Gail said warmly. "And has he replaced your car yet? It's been a year now, hasn't it?" The direct question caught me off guard. I'd shared the situation with Gail during a moment of frustration last winter, when I'd arrived late and soaking wet after missing a bus connection in the rain. "Not yet," I admitted, discomfort heating my cheeks. "He's been very busy." Gail's expression shifted subtly, disapproval tightening the corners of her mouth. "Too busy to fulfill a promise to his mother who's taking buses in winter after selling her car to help him?" Put so bluntly, it sounded worse than I allowed myself to acknowledge. "The timing isn't right," I said, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. "With Christmas expenses and everything." "Martha, Gail said gently. "You're one of the most generous people I know. But sometimes I wonder if your son takes advantage of that generosity." I busied myself with straightening papers, uncomfortable with both the observation and the truth it contained. "He's a good boy at heart," I said finally. "Just distracted sometimes." Gail patted my shoulder before returning to her office. "Well, I hope there's a car with a big red bow waiting for you tonight. You've certainly earned it." Her words followed me through the afternoon, echoing as I left work early, stopped at a crowded grocery store for cranberry sauce, and navigated the holiday bus schedule. What had I earned, really? The right to expect a son to honor his promises? The courtesy of consideration for my time and comfort? These seemed like such basic things, yet somehow I'd been conditioned to see them as excessive expectations. The second bus dropped me 2 blocks from Bradley and Heather's house in the upscale Oakwood neighborhood. Their 2-story colonial looked particularly impressive today, outlined in professional-grade Christmas lights that Bradley had mentioned hiring a service to install. Tasteful wreaths adorned each window, and an elegant spruce garland wrapped the porch railings. Heather's touch, no doubt. I adjusted my packages, the canvas tote containing carefully wrapped gifts, my small purse, and the bag with cranberry sauce, and began walking the final distance. Despite the physical discomfort of carrying everything after a long day, a familiar warmth kindled in my chest. It was Christmas Eve, and I was going to see my family. Whatever tensions or disappointments existed between us, surely the holiday spirit would soothe them away. A sleek BMW pulled alongside me, window lowering to reveal my neighbor from the apartment complex, Ruth Miller. "Martha, you're not walking in this cold?" she called, concern evident in her voice. "Just from the bus stop," I explained. "It's not far." "Nonsense. Get in. I'm heading right past there on my way to my daughter's." Gratefully, I accepted the ride, settling into the warm car with a sigh of relief. "Still no replacement for your Toyota?" Ruth asked as we drove the short distance. She knew the story. Most of my close acquaintances did. "Not yet," I replied, the answer well rehearsed by now. Ruth made a disapproving sound. "And yet they live in that big house in Oakwood. Priorities, I suppose." I didn't respond, unwilling to criticize Bradley to others despite my own private disappointments. As we pulled up to the house, Ruth squeezed my hand briefly. "Merry Christmas, Martha. Remember you're joining us for New Year's brunch, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," I assured her, gathering my packages and stepping out into the cold once more. Standing before my son's impressive home, packages in hand and cranberry sauce dutifully acquired, I pushed aside Ruth's implied criticism and Gail's earlier observations. Tonight was about family. Tonight was about celebration and togetherness. Tonight, perhaps, would finally bring the recognition of my sacrifices that I tried so hard not to need. With that hope firmly in mind, I climbed the steps to the front door and rang the bell, the weight of expectation far heavier than the packages in my arms. "Mom, you made it!" Bradley exclaimed as he opened the door, ushering me into the warmth of the foyer. He took the grocery bag from my hand, peering inside. "Great, you got the cranberry sauce. Heather will be relieved." No hug, I noticed. No offer to help with my other packages. Just confirmation that I'd completed the assigned errand. "Merry Christmas, Bradley," I said, setting down my bags to remove my coat. The house smelled wonderful. Roasting turkey, pine from the massive Christmas tree in the living room, cinnamon from what I assumed was Heather's signature apple pie. "Yeah, Merry Christmas," he replied distractedly, already turning toward the kitchen. "Heather, Mom brought the cranberry sauce." I hung my coat in the closet and gathered my gift bags, following Bradley toward the heart of the house. The home my son and his wife had purchased 3 years ago was truly beautiful. Open concept with high ceilings, designer furniture, and the kind of carefully curated decor that looked effortlessly elegant while requiring substantial effort and expense to maintain. Heather emerged from the kitchen wearing a festive red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair arranged in perfect waves. "Martha, there you are. Thank goodness you found cranberry sauce. I was just telling Bradley we couldn't have Christmas dinner without it." "Happy to help," I said, accepting her brief air kiss beside my cheek. The store was packed, but I managed. "I'm sure it was a nightmare," she sympathized without really sympathizing. I should have sent Bradley earlier, but he's been on important calls all afternoon. End-of-year business, you know how it is. I did know how it was. I'd been handling end-of-year accounting all week, but I merely nodded, placing my gift bags beneath the opulently decorated Christmas tree in the living room. The presents I'd already seen there were wrapped in matching paper with designer ribbons. Heather's aesthetic at work again. "Grandma Martha!" Two teenage voices called almost in unison as Heather's sons from her first marriage, Tyler and Jason, bounded into the room. At 14 and 16, they were at that age where they alternated between childlike enthusiasm and teenage sullenness, often within the same minute. "Hello, boys," I greeted them warmly, genuinely pleased to see them. Whatever complications existed between the adults, I'd always made a point of being a proper grandmother figure to these children who had no biological connection to me. "Excited for Christmas?" "You bet," Tyler, the younger one, grinned. "Dad, I mean Bradley, says we're getting something epic this year." "Epic, huh?" I smiled, raising an eyebrow at Bradley, who had returned from the kitchen with a glass of wine for himself. "None for me," I noticed. "Sounds intriguing. Can we open one present tonight?" Jason asked, eyeing the pile under the tree. "It's tradition." "After dinner," Heather answered, appearing with a glass of wine that matched Bradley's. Again, none offered to me. "Martha, can I get you something to drink? Water? Tea?" "Wine would be lovely," I said, refusing to be relegated to non-alcoholic beverages just because of my age. "Red, if you have it open." A flicker of something, annoyance, surprise, crossed Heather's face before her polite mask returned. "Of course. Bradley, get your mother some wine while I check on the turkey." Bradley dutifully poured me a glass, though I noticed it was considerably less full than their own. Small slights, perhaps not even conscious ones, but they accumulated over time like snowflakes, eventually creating drifts that couldn't be ignored. Dinner itself was a pleasant enough affair on the surface. Heather was an excellent cook when she chose to be, and she'd certainly chosen to be for Christmas Eve. The table was beautifully set with the fine china and crystal they'd registered for when they married, items I'd contributed significantly to purchasing, I recalled. Conversation flowed easily enough, though I couldn't help noticing how it consistently revolved around Bradley's business successes, the boys' achievements, or Heather's social connections. When I mentioned my own small news, a promotion to senior accountant at Dalton despite my part-time status, Bradley nodded distractedly. "That's great, Mom. More money, I hope? You could use it to finally get a decent car instead of taking those buses." The irony of his statement hung in the air between us. I took a careful sip of wine before responding. "I was under the impression you were going to help with that, Bradley. As we discussed when I sold my Toyota to help with your cash flow problems last year." An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. Heather's eyes darted to Bradley, who suddenly became very interested in cutting his turkey into precise pieces. "Right. Well," he finally said, "business has been good, but expenses are up too. The boys' private school tuition increased again, and we had to renovate the master bathroom. Structural issues couldn't be avoided. But soon, Mom. I haven't forgotten." "Of course," I said quietly, the familiar disappointment settling in my chest. "I understand." Heather, ever the efficient hostess, quickly redirected the conversation. "Tyler, tell Grandma Martha about your science project that won first place." And just like that, the moment passed, my needs once again deprioritized and pushed aside. I listened to Tyler's enthusiastic description of his experimental solar panels, genuinely interested, despite the lingering hurt. These boys were good kids at heart, even if they were being raised with a concerning sense of entitlement. After dinner came the tradition the boys had been eagerly anticipating, opening one gift each on Christmas Eve. As we gathered in the living room, Heather took charge of the proceedings with her usual efficiency. "Let's start with the boys," she announced, selecting two identically sized packages from under the tree. "These are from your father and me." The teenagers tore into the wrapping to reveal the latest model of smartphones, prompting whoops of excitement and immediate unboxing. No mention of the expense, I noted, despite the budget concerns that had been cited as reasons for not replacing my car. "Now for Bradley," Heather continued, handing him a small, elegantly wrapped box. Inside was an expensive-looking watch that he immediately exclaimed over, kissing Heather in gratitude. "Your turn, Heather," Bradley said, selecting a medium-sized gift bag from beneath the tree. She pulled out a designer handbag that apparently was exactly what she wanted, judging from her squeal of delight. "Oh, Bradley, it's perfect. The exact one I showed you at the mall." The boys were absorbed in setting up their new phones. Bradley and Heather were admiring their gifts, and no one seemed to notice that I sat quietly, empty-handed, my own carefully chosen presents still untouched beneath the tree. Finally, Bradley seemed to remember my presence. "Oh, Mom's turn," he said, reaching for a small envelope that had been tucked beneath the tree skirt. "This is from Heather and me." The envelope was lightweight, containing a single gift card to Barnes & Noble for $50. No personal message, no careful selection based on my interests or needs, just a generic gift card with the store's standard holiday design. "Thank you," I said, working to keep disappointment from my voice. "This will come in handy for the mystery novels I enjoy." "You're always reading," Bradley said, as though this justified the impersonal nature of the gift. "Figured you'd appreciate choosing your own books." I thought of the first edition novel I'd spent months hunting down for him, the hand-knitted cashmere scarf for Heather that had taken weeks of work, the detailed model airplanes I'd crafted for the boys. The disparity was stark, but I swallowed my hurt. "It's very thoughtful." "Now," Bradley said, standing up with a sudden energy, "I have one more surprise, but it's too big to wrap." "Everyone to the garage!" The boys leapt up immediately, phones momentarily forgotten in the excitement of a new mystery. Heather's expression told me she already knew what awaited, her smile containing a smugness that sent an uneasy feeling through me. "Coming, Mom?" Bradley called, already halfway to the garage door with his arm around Heather's waist. "Of course," I replied, placing the gift card carefully in my purse and following the excited family procession. Whatever was waiting in that garage, I had a sinking feeling it would only deepen the wound this evening had already inflicted on my heart. The garage lights flicked on dramatically as Bradley opened the door, revealing what had been hidden inside. A gleaming new Mercedes-Benz sedan in sleek obsidian black, adorned with an enormous red bow across its hood. The car seemed to radiate luxury, its polished surface reflecting the overhead lights like a dark mirror. "Oh my God!" Heather gasped with theatrical surprise that didn't quite ring true. She clearly knew about this gift already. "Bradley, you didn't!" "Merry Christmas, babe," my son said proudly, dangling the keys before her. "The C-Class you've been eyeing for months, fully loaded, all the premium packages." Heather squealed, snatching the keys and rushing to the driver's door. The boys immediately started circling the vehicle, phones out to document every angle for social media. "This is insane, Dad!" Tyler exclaimed, using the term he'd adopted for Bradley in the past year. "How much did this cost?" "Never mind that," Bradley laughed, though the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "Only the best for your mom." I stood frozen in the doorway, the contrast between my $50 gift card and this luxury vehicle striking me like a physical blow. The car before me probably cost close to $60,000, more than enough to repay my loan and purchase a reliable vehicle for me several times over. As Heather slid into the driver's seat, running her hands reverently over the leather steering wheel, a memory surfaced with painful clarity. Standing in the driveway of my modest home a year ago, watching as the young couple drove away in my reliable Toyota. I'd sold it for $25,000 to help Bradley through his business crisis, accepting his fervent promise that he'd replace it as soon as things turned around. Now here he was, things having more than turned around, presenting his wife with a Mercedes while his mother continued taking pre-dawn buses to work. "Mom, isn't it gorgeous?" Bradley called, finally remembering my presence. "Come check out the interior. The leather is this special hand-stitched design." Somehow, I made my legs move forward, managed to examine the car with appropriate comments about its luxury features. Heather barely acknowledged me as she explored her new vehicle, exclaiming over each discovered feature with the delight of someone who felt entirely entitled to such extravagance. "Take a picture of me in it for Instagram," she instructed Tyler, who obligingly began directing a full photo shoot, while Jason added dramatic lighting effects with his phone's flashlight. "How are you affording this?" I asked Bradley quietly, while Heather was distracted with her impromptu social media moment. He shrugged, that familiar evasive look crossing his face. "Business has been good. Got some financing with great terms. Don't worry about it." But I did worry about it, and with good reason. Because there was something Bradley didn't know, something he'd apparently forgotten in his eagerness to impress his wife with this extravagant gift. When he'd needed help last year during his business crisis, Bradley hadn't just asked for cash, he'd also needed help securing new lines of credit with his damaged business rating. At his request, I had co-signed several loans and financial arrangements, using my excellent credit history to secure favorable terms he couldn't qualify for a loan. Among those arrangements, if my suspicion was correct, was the financing for this very Mercedes, a detail Bradley had conveniently omitted from tonight's grand reveal. Bradley, I began carefully, this financing arrangement— Mom, can we talk about boring financial stuff later? He interrupted, nodding toward Heather, who was now recording a video walk-around of her new car. It's Christmas Eve. Let's just enjoy the moment. The moment. His moment of being the magnificent provider. Heather's moment of receiving an extravagant symbol of status. The boys' moment of documenting their family's prosperity for their friends to envy. None of them spared a thought for the woman who had helped make it all possible, who had sacrificed her own transportation and comfort to keep Bradley's business afloat during its darkest hour. Of course, I said, stepping back as Heather started the engine to hear its purr. It's a beautiful car. For the next half hour, I stood in the increasingly chilly garage, forgotten as the family fawned over the Mercedes. Heather took each of the boys for a quick drive around the block, then Bradley for a slightly longer circuit. No one asked if I wanted a turn behind the wheel or even a ride as passenger. Eventually, the excitement dimmed enough for them to remember the remaining Christmas Eve traditions, cookies and cocoa before bed. We migrated back into the house, Heather still clutching her new keys, as though afraid someone might take them away. I can't believe you kept this secret, she gushed to Bradley. I'm going to be the envy of everyone at the club. That's the idea, he grinned, looking pleased with himself. Wait until you see what else is under the tree for tomorrow. I sat quietly, nursing a cup of cooling cocoa, the pain in my chest growing sharper. Not just the pain of being so clearly an afterthought in my son's life, but the dawning realization of how completely I'd allowed this situation to develop. For years, I had prioritized Bradley's needs above my own, had accepted his broken promises and thoughtlessness as just how busy people are these days. I had made excuses for his behavior to friends, to colleagues, and worst of all, to myself. The boys were absorbed in their new phones. Heather was scrolling through reactions to her car photos on social media, and Bradley was brimming with self-satisfaction at his grand gesture. None of them seemed to notice when I gathered my coat and purse. I should be going, I said, interrupting their digital absorption. It's getting late, and the last bus on the holiday schedule will be coming soon. The bus? Bradley frowned, as though just remembering my transportation situation. Right, I forgot you took the bus here. I could drive you home, Mom. No need to trouble yourself, I replied, an unfamiliar firmness entering my voice. You're all enjoying your evening. I'll be fine. At least let me call you an Uber, he offered, reaching for his phone. The bus will be fine, I insisted, suddenly needing to be away from this house, this family that had taken so much and given so little in return. Merry Christmas, everyone. My gifts for you are under the tree for tomorrow. You're not coming for Christmas dinner? Heather asked, looking up from her phone with the first real attention she'd paid me all evening. I don't think so, I said, surprised at how easily the decision formed as I spoke. I have other plans. This was a lie. I had no other plans, but the thought of sitting through another meal watching them enjoy their extravagant gifts while I was expected to be grateful for my $50 gift card was suddenly unbearable. But it's Christmas, Bradley protested weakly, though I noticed he didn't press for details about my supposed alternative plans. Yes, it is, I agreed, buttoning my coat. Enjoy your day tomorrow. I'll be in touch. As I left through the front door, no one followed to see me out or make sure I got to the bus stop safely. No one called after me with genuine concern. The last image I had before the door closed was of the family already returning to their electronic devices and excited chatter about the Mercedes. The night air was bitterly cold as I walked to the bus stop, but something was warming inside me. Not the comfort of family love that should have come from a Christmas gathering, but the heat of a resolution long overdue. By the time I boarded the nearly empty bus for home, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Tomorrow, while Bradley and Heather celebrated with their extravagant gifts, I would be making some calls that would dramatically change our family dynamic. Starting with the financing company that held the loan for that gleaming new Mercedes. My apartment felt particularly small and quiet when I returned from Bradley's house. I hung my coat carefully in the closet, noting the worn spots at the cuffs that I'd been meaning to mend. Everything in my modest living space spoke of careful economy and maintenance. Nothing was new, but everything was clean, functional, and well cared for. Unlike my relationship with my son, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my small kitchen table, surrounded by the Christmas cards I'd received from friends and colleagues. Each one represented a genuine connection. People who asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer. People who remembered my birthday without prompting. People who valued my presence in their lives. The contrast between these authentic relationships and the hollow performance I just endured at Bradley's was stark and painful. When had I become so incidental to my only child? When had my needs, my comfort, my very presence become such an afterthought? Perhaps more importantly, when had I decided this treatment was acceptable? I opened my purse and took out the $50 gift card. My Christmas present from my financially successful son, who had just gifted his wife a Mercedes. The plastic rectangle seemed to mock me with its generic holiday design and impersonal nature. This was what Bradley thought I was worth, despite everything I had sacrificed for him over the years. My gaze drifted to the small desk in the corner where I kept important papers. Rising from the table, I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Bradley Loans. Inside was a record of our financial entanglements, the $75,000 personal loan with its signed agreement promising repayment within 18 months or sooner if business improves, the $25,000 from selling my car, and copies of various financing arrangements I'd co-signed to help his business recover. I spread these documents on the table, examining each one carefully. There, among the financing papers, was confirmation of my suspicion. I was indeed listed as the primary borrower on the Mercedes loan, with Bradley as co-signer rather than the other way around. My superior credit rating had been used to secure favorable financing terms for a luxury vehicle I would never drive, while I continued to wake before dawn to catch buses in the winter cold. The realization crystallized something inside me. This wasn't just about money or material possessions. This was about respect, consideration, and basic human dignity. I had allowed Bradley, encouraged him even, to treat me as a resource rather than a person with my own needs and feelings. No more. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve drafting 3 documents. The first was a formal letter to Bradley requesting repayment of the full $100,000 loan within 30 days, as stipulated in our original agreement. The second was a letter to the financing company for the Mercedes, informing them that I wished to remove myself from the loan immediately. The third was a letter to my attorney, outlining the situation and requesting legal assistance if Bradley failed to honor our agreement. By the time I finished, it was well past midnight, technically Christmas morning. Outside, a light snow had begun to fall, dusting the window ledge with crystalline flakes that caught the streetlight's glow. In another time, another mood, I might have found it beautiful. Tonight, it only reminded me of the cold journey I faced to work each day because of a broken promise. I slept fitfully, waking early out of habit, despite having no bus to catch on Christmas Day. I made coffee and toast, then sat by my small artificial tree, looking at the few presents friends had given me at our holiday lunch the previous week. I should open them, I thought, but somehow couldn't summon the energy just yet. Instead, I turned on my laptop and began researching used cars in my price range. If Bradley repaid the loan as requested, I would finally be able to replace my Toyota with something reliable. Nothing fancy, just a vehicle that would restore my independence and dignity. The thought brought a smile to my face for the first time since leaving Bradley's house. My phone rang around noon, Bradley's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for that conversation yet. He didn't leave a message. Typical. Ruth from my apartment complex called next, inviting me to join her family for Christmas dinner since I wasn't going to Bradley's after all. The kindness in her offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. That would be lovely, I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. What can I bring? Just yourself, she insisted. We have plenty. After hanging up, I allowed myself to open the gifts from my friends. A soft scarf in my favorite blue, a mystery novel by my preferred author, a gift card for the local coffee shop where we often met. Each present, though modest in monetary value, had been chosen with clear knowledge of my tastes and preferences. Each represented genuine thought and care. I dressed carefully for Ruth's dinner in my best slacks and a festive red sweater, wrapping the new scarf around my neck. As I was about to leave, my phone rang again, Bradley for the 3rd time. Again, I let it go to voicemail. This time, he left a message. Mom, it's me. Just checking that you're okay since we didn't hear from you today. Call us later if you want. Heather's parents are coming for dinner, but anyway, Merry Christmas. No mention of where I was spending my Christmas, no real concern beyond perfunctory checking, just as I'd expected. Ruth's family gathering was warm and welcoming. Her 2 adult daughters with their families, her brother visiting from Florida, neighbors from our apartment complex who, like me, had no close family nearby. We ate, laughed, played games, and exchanged small but thoughtful gifts. I contributed my signature apple pie, hurriedly baked that morning, which earned appreciative comments from everyone. "Martha, how's that son of yours?" Ruth's brother asked during dessert. "Did he finally replace your car like he promised?" The table quieted slightly, the kind of hush that falls when a potentially uncomfortable topic arises. Ruth shot her brother a warning glance. "Not yet," I replied, surprising myself with my candor. "But I've taken steps to resolve that situation. I expect I'll have a car again within the month." "Good for you," said Ruth's older daughter, raising her wine glass slightly. "It's about time." The simple validation, these people seeing and acknowledging what I had been reluctant to confront, loosened something in my chest. For too long, I had made excuses for Bradley's behavior, had minimized my own needs, had accepted less than I deserved out of some misguided notion of maternal sacrifice. "Yes," I agreed, lifting my own glass. "It is about time." By the time I returned to my apartment that evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. The letters I had written the night before still sat on my desk, waiting to be sent. I reviewed them once more, making a few small edits to soften the tone slightly without compromising the message. Tomorrow I would mail them, setting in motion the changes that were long overdue. My phone showed 5 missed calls from Bradley, but still no voicemail beyond the brief one from morning. Whatever urgency he felt apparently wasn't important enough to articulate. Perhaps he had finally remembered the Mercedes financing arrangement. Perhaps Heather had asked why I hadn't called to thank them for the gift card. Perhaps the boys had wondered why I wasn't there to see them open the carefully crafted presents I'd left under the tree. Whatever the reason, it could wait. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I had prioritized my own well-being over Bradley's convenience or comfort. It felt foreign, slightly uncomfortable, but undeniably right. I slept deeply that night, dreamless and at peace with my decision. The time for silent sacrifice was over. The time for reclaiming my dignity had begun. The day after Christmas dawned clear and cold. I dressed in my warmest clothes and walked the 3 blocks to the post office, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The weight of the 3 envelopes in my purse felt significant, not just paper and ink, but the physical manifestation of my resolve. The post office was quiet, most people still celebrating the holiday at home. I sent the letters with delivery confirmation, ensuring I would know exactly when each reached its destination. The letter to Bradley would arrive first, likely tomorrow. The financing company and my attorney would receive theirs the following day. As I walked home, my phone rang. Bradley again. This time, I answered. "Hello, Bradley." "Mom, finally. Where have you been? I've been calling since yesterday." His voice held more irritation than concern. "I spent Christmas with friends," I replied evenly. "I told you I had other plans." "Right, but it's Christmas. We expected to hear from you at some point. The boys wanted to thank you for their gifts." "The model airplanes? They liked them then?" A slight hesitation. "Yeah, they're really detailed. Must have taken you ages." I could tell from his tone that the boys had barely glanced at my handcrafted presents amidst their haul of electronic gadgets and expensive toys. Still, at least he was making the effort to acknowledge them. "They did take considerable time," I confirmed. "I'm glad the boys appreciated them." "Listen, Mom," Bradley continued, his voice shifting to the cajoling tone I knew well, the one he used when leading up to asking for something. "Heather and I were talking, and we feel bad about you taking the bus home on Christmas Eve. We should have insisted on driving you." "That's all right," I said, maintaining my composure despite the belated concern. "I managed fine, as I have been for the past year." Another hesitation. "Right. About that. I know I promised to help you get a new car after you sold yours to help me out. I haven't forgotten. I'm glad to hear it. The thing is, with the holidays and the new Mercedes payments, things are a bit tight right now." I cut him off, something I rarely did. "Bradley, you'll be receiving a letter from me tomorrow. I think we should wait to discuss this further until you've read it." "A letter? What kind of letter? Is everything okay?" "Everything will be," I said with more confidence than I had felt in years. "We can talk after you've read it." Despite his continued questions, I ended the call soon after, unwilling to be drawn into the discussion before he had the letter in hand. Let him read the formal request for loan repayment, the clear outlining of his broken promises. Let him sit with that reality for a bit, as I had sat with the reality of being forgotten at his Christmas celebration. The next 2 days passed in a strange calm. I returned to work, grateful for the structure and purpose it provided. Colleagues asked about my Christmas, and for the first time, I gave honest rather than sanitized answers. Actually, it was quite revealing, I told Gail when she inquired. I spent it with friends instead of family, and realized how one-sided my relationship with Bradley has become. She looked surprised at my candor, but squeezed my shoulder supportively. It's never too late to establish boundaries, Martha. I'm discovering that, I agreed. By Wednesday afternoon, I knew Bradley would have received my letter. I expected an immediate call, angry, defensive, or perhaps manipulatively apologetic. When no call came, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Was he taking time to consider his response, or simply dismissing my concerns, as he had so often before? Thursday morning, I checked the delivery confirmations online. The financing company and my attorney had now received their letters as well. The wheels were in motion. I felt a curious lightness as I boarded the bus to work, as though the weight of unspoken resentments and unenforced boundaries had physically lifted from my shoulders. It was mid-morning when my phone rang. Not Bradley's number, but one I didn't recognize. Martha Reynolds speaking. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Thomas Wilkins from Premier Auto Financing. The man's voice was professionally courteous, but with an undertone of concern. I'm calling regarding your request to remove yourself as primary borrower from the Mercedes-Benz financing agreement. Yes, Mr. Wilkins? I wanted to discuss this situation with you directly. It's rather unusual to have the primary borrower request removal, especially so soon after financing approval. I understand, I replied calmly. However, as I explained in my letter, I co-signed this loan at my son's request to help him secure favorable terms. I was not aware that I would be listed as primary borrower, nor that the vehicle would be presented as a gift to my daughter-in-law while I remain without transportation myself. A pause on the line. I see. That does put things in a different light. To be clear, Mrs. Reynolds, you have no access to or use of this vehicle? None whatsoever, I confirmed. I continue to rely on public transportation despite having sold my own car last year to help my son's business during a financial crisis. And your son is Bradley Reynolds, the co-signer on this loan. That's correct. I heard keyboard clicking in the background. According to our records, Mr. Reynolds indicated this vehicle was being purchased for the primary borrower's use. That would be you, with him as an authorized driver. There was no mention of the vehicle being a gift for a third party. This revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet somehow it still stung. Bradley had actively misrepresented the situation to secure the financing, using my credit history and trust against me. That is definitely not the case, I stated firmly. I have not driven the vehicle even once. It was presented as a Christmas gift to my daughter-in-law and is in her possession. More typing. Mrs. Reynolds, given these circumstances, we'll need to reassess this financing arrangement immediately. Since you're the primary borrower, you have the right to request return of the vehicle. Alternatively, we can attempt to restructure the loan with Mr. Reynolds as primary borrower, though this would likely result in significantly higher interest rates based on his credit profile. I understand, I said, a mixture of vindication and sadness washing over me. Please proceed with whichever option aligns with your company policies. I simply cannot continue to be responsible for financing a luxury vehicle that someone else is driving while I take the bus to work. Of course, we'll contact Mr. Reynolds today to discuss next steps. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Mrs. Reynolds. After ending the call, I sat at my desk, momentarily overwhelmed by what I had set in motion. This wasn't just about a car or a loan. It was about finally standing up for myself after years of allowing Bradley to prioritize his wants over my needs. My phone rang again almost immediately. Bradley. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready for that conversation. I needed to maintain the emotional clarity I'd finally achieved. The voicemail he left was revealing. Mom, what the hell? The financing company just called about the Mercedes. They're saying you want the car back or they'll repossess it. Call me immediately. No mention of my letter requesting loan repayment. No acknowledgement of the deception regarding the car financing. just immediate concern over the potential loss of the status symbol he'd given Heather. I texted rather than called. "I'm at work. We can discuss this evening after 6. His reply came instantly. "This can't wait until evening. Heather is freaking out. They said they might take the car." I turned my phone to silent and returned to my work. For once, Bradley's crisis would not become my emergency. For once, his convenience would not take precedence over my responsibilities. For once, I would not drop everything to smooth over a situation of his own making. It was a small act of self-respect, but it felt monumental. By 5 o'clock, my phone showed 12 missed calls from Bradley, 3 from Heather, and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. I reviewed them as I waited for the bus home, noting the progression from demands to pleas to accusations. "Mom, you need to call the financing company and fix this. They're saying I misrepresented the loan purpose. This is a misunderstanding." Heather is in tears. "How could you do this to us? Call me back!" "Dad would be so disappointed in how you're treating me." That last one was particularly rich, considering my late husband had often cautioned me about enabling Bradley's sense of entitlement. Robert had been the boundary setter in our family, the one who insisted Bradley work summer jobs as a teenager, the one who refused to bail him out of his first failed business venture in his 20s. After Robert's death, I had slipped too easily into the role of rescuer and provider, perhaps trying to compensate for the loss of a father with additional maternal support. Robert wouldn't be disappointed in my current actions. He would wonder why it had taken me 12 years to assert myself. The bus was crowded with post-holiday shoppers, giving me time to gather my thoughts for the inevitable confrontation. By the time I reached my stop, I had centered myself in a calm determination that felt unfamiliar but empowering. I had barely unlocked my apartment door when pounding erupted from the other side. Looking through the peephole, I saw Bradley, his face flushed with agitation. "I know you're home, Mom. Open the door." I took a deep breath, hung up my coat, and opened the door with deliberate calm. "Good evening, Bradley. I see you got my letter." He pushed past me into the apartment, waving a handful of papers. My letter, and presumably something from the financing company. What the hell is this about? They're threatening to repossess Heather's car unless I refinance at double the interest rate. "It's not Heather's car," I pointed out, closing the door and following him into my small living room. "According to the financing documents, it's my car. A car I've never driven, don't have keys for, and didn't agree to purchase. That's just paperwork. You knew I was getting the car for Heather." "Did I?" I asked, my voice level. "When you asked me to co-sign for business vehicles, you never mentioned you were financing a luxury car for your wife, while I continue taking buses after selling my car to help you." Bradley ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "The business is doing well now. I was going to help you get a car soon." "You've been saying that for a year, Bradley. Meanwhile, you had no problem buying a Mercedes. That's different." "Yes, it is different," I agreed, sitting down in my armchair and gesturing for him to take the sofa. "It clearly demonstrates your priorities. Now, did you read the rest of my letter about repayment of the $100,000 loan?" He collapsed onto the sofa, the fight momentarily going out of him. "Mom, I can't possibly repay $100,000 in 30 days. You know that." "Actually, I don't know that. You've been telling me for months how well the business is doing, well enough to purchase a luxury vehicle worth more than half that amount. That's financed. I don't have $100,000 in cash. Then perhaps you shouldn't have presented your wife with such an extravagant gift before repaying your debt to me," I suggested mildly. "A debt, I might add, that saved your business from collapse." Bradley stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. For years, I had been the amenable mother who made his life easier, who never pushed back against broken promises, who accepted whatever crumbs of attention he deigned to offer. This version of his mother, calm, firm, unwilling to be manipulated, was unfamiliar territory. "I can't believe you're doing this," he finally said. "Threatening legal action against your own son? Having the car repossessed? What will people think?" "I'm not concerned with what people will think, Bradley. I'm concerned with being treated fairly and having my contributions valued. The $50 gift card, while Heather got a Mercedes, made it abundantly clear where I stand in your priorities." He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. "This is about the gift card? Seriously? I'm sorry if you felt it wasn't enough, but this isn't about the monetary value of the gift," I interrupted. It's about the thought, or lack thereof, behind it. It's about watching you present Heather with a luxury vehicle, while I've spent a year taking buses after selling my car to help you. It's about the pattern of taking my support for granted, while giving nothing meaningful in return. That's not fair. I appreciate everything you've done. Appreciation isn't just words, Bradley. It's actions, and your actions tell a very different story than your words. He leaned forward, switching to the cajoling tone that had worked so often in the past. Mom, please, I understand you're upset. Let me make it up to you. Once this car situation is sorted out, I'll help you find a nice used vehicle, something reliable. I requested repayment of the loan in my letter, I reminded him. Once that's resolved, I'll purchase my own vehicle, thank you. I told you I can't repay $100,000 in 30 days. Then propose a payment plan, I suggested, with interest, as stipulated in the loan agreement you signed. He stared at me, bewildered by my continued resistance to his charm offensive. What's happened to you? You've never been like this before. I've never needed to be like this before, I replied honestly. I've always trusted that you would honor your commitments to me without formal enforcement. Clearly, that was a mistake. Bradley's phone rang, Heather's ringtone. He answered immediately, turning slightly away as though seeking privacy in my small living room. Hey, babe. Yes, I'm with her now. No, it's complicated. I know you have the dinner tonight. I'm trying. I could hear Heather's agitated voice through the speaker, though not her exact words. Whatever she was saying had Bradley's expression shifting from frustration to resignation. I have to go, he said after ending the call. Heather has that charity dinner tonight. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. The financing company needs an answer sooner than tomorrow, I reminded him. And my letter requested a response regarding the loan repayment within 3 days. He stood, smoothing his expensive coat with an agitated gesture. I'll figure something out. But Mom, please reconsider this approach. We're family. We should be able to work things out without lawyers and formal demands. I agree. Family should also keep promises and show basic consideration. When you demonstrate you're ready to do that, I'll be here. At the door, Bradley turned back, his expression a complex mixture of resentment, confusion, and the first glimmers of genuine remorse. I never meant to hurt you, Mom. I just got caught up in everything. I know, I said and meant it. My son wasn't malicious, just selfish and entitled, qualities I had unfortunately helped foster by continually placing his needs above my own. But intentions don't change outcomes, Bradley. At some point, the impact of your actions matters more than what you meant by them. After he left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching as darkness fell over the neighborhood. I felt drained, but curiously peaceful. For the first time in years, I had advocated for myself without apology or qualification. Whether Bradley responded with genuine change or continued resistance remained to be seen, but I had taken the first critical step toward rebalancing our relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. Saw your son storming out of the building. You okay? I smiled at her concern. Better than okay. Standing up for myself, finally. Her response came quickly. Proud of you, Martha. About damn time. Indeed it was. About damn time. The following morning brought a series of increasingly urgent voicemails and texts from Bradley. Evidence that the financing company was not backing down on their demand that the Mercedes be either returned or refinanced solely in his name. Mom, they're saying I have until tomorrow to decide. This is insane. Heather had to take an Uber to her yoga class because she's afraid to drive the car now. Can you please call them and explain this was a misunderstanding? I responded with a single text. There's no misunderstanding. You used my credit to purchase a luxury vehicle under false pretenses while refusing to help me replace the car I sold to save your business. The financing company is responding appropriately. His reply came immediately. I'll lose my favorable interest rate if I refinance a loan. Yes, I texted back. That's how credit ratings work. Mine is excellent because I honor my financial commitments. Yours is not. When I arrived at work, Gail noticed my unusually confident demeanor. You look different today, Martha. Good different. I feel different, I acknowledged. I finally stopped making excuses for Bradley's behavior and stood up for myself. About time, she said, echoing Ruth's sentiment. Coffee later? I want to hear all about it. Over mid-morning coffee in the break room, I gave Gail the condensed version of recent events. The Mercedes, the gift card, my letter demanding loan repayment, and the financing company's intervention. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Will he actually have to give back the car?" "That depends on whether he can qualify for financing on his own, which seems unlikely given his credit history. He might be able to make a larger down payment to offset the risk, but that would require liquid capital he claims not to have." "Despite running a supposedly successful business," Gail observed dryly. "Exactly. The lifestyle he and Heather maintain doesn't leave much room for saving or contingency planning." "And the loan repayment? Do you think he'll actually pay you back?" I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. "He'll have to, one way or another. I have documentation, and my attorney is prepared to pursue legal remedies if necessary." Gail studied me with newfound respect. "You know, I've always admired your dedication to your son, Martha, but I like this new version of you even better, the one who recognizes her own worth." Her words stayed with me throughout the workday, a welcome affirmation that I was finally on the right path. When I checked my phone during lunch, I found a message from my attorney confirming receipt of my letter and outlining potential next steps if Bradley failed to respond appropriately. By late afternoon, another call came, not from Bradley this time, but from Heather. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for histrionics or manipulation. "Hello, Heather." "Martha." Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "I think we need to discuss this situation like adults." "I agree," I replied calmly. "Adults honor their commitments and treat others with respect." "This is about respect? You're trying to take away my car." "It was never your car, Heather. It was financed in my name without my knowledge that it would be presented to you as a gift. A remarkably inappropriate gift, considering your husband still owes me $100,000, and I've been taking buses for a year after selling my car to help his business." A moment of silence followed this blunt assessment. When Heather spoke again, her tone had shifted slightly. "Look, I understand you're upset about the gift card. Bradley should have been more thoughtful, but this reaction seems extreme." "This isn't about the gift card," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "The gift card was merely a symptom of a larger pattern of dismissive treatment. This is about Bradley using my credit to purchase a luxury vehicle for you, while breaking his promise to help me replace the car I sacrificed for him. He was going to help you get a car eventually," Heather insisted. "Things have just been tight with the business expansion and the boys' school expenses. Not too tight for a Mercedes, apparently." Another silence, longer this time. "What exactly do you want, Martha?" she finally asked, her voice wary. "I want exactly what I outlined in my letter to Bradley, repayment of the $100,000 loan according to the terms of our agreement. As for the Mercedes, that's between Bradley and the financing company now. I've removed myself from the equation. He can't possibly repay $100,000 all at once. Then he can propose a payment plan with interest, as I suggested during our conversation yesterday." I could practically hear Heather calculating on the other end of the line. What if we sold the Mercedes? That would free up capital toward the loan repayment." The suggestion surprised me. I hadn't expected Heather to volunteer, giving up her prized new status symbol. "That would certainly be a start," I acknowledged. "And if we commit to a payment plan for the remainder, would you call off your attorney?" "If the terms are reasonable and the commitment is honored, yes." Heather's voice took on a business-like efficiency that I'd rarely heard from her before. "I'll talk to Bradley. We'll figure something out. But Martha?" "Yes? This changes things between us. You understand that, right?" "Things were already changed, Heather. The moment you accepted a luxury vehicle while I continued taking buses after helping save your comfortable lifestyle. You just didn't notice until it affected you directly." After hanging up, I reflected on Heather's unexpected practicality. Despite her materialistic tendencies, she had grasped the reality of the situation more quickly than Bradley had. Perhaps she recognized that preserving access to my financial support and credit was more valuable in the long run than one luxury car, no matter how prestigious. When I arrived home that evening, an email was waiting from Bradley, the first formal response to my letter. The tone was markedly different from his earlier texts and calls, professional, conciliatory, and notably lacking in emotional manipulation. "Dear Mom," it began, the formality itself a signal of the shifted dynamic between us. "After careful consideration, I would like to propose the following arrangement regarding the outstanding loan. Immediate payment of $25,000 from the sale of the Mercedes, monthly payments of $12,500 beginning February 1st until the remaining $75,000 plus agreed upon interest is paid in full. Documentation of this payment plan to be drawn up by a neutral third-party attorney. Additionally, I would like to acknowledge that I failed to honor my commitment to help replace your car after you sold yours, to assist my business. As a gesture of good faith, I would like to facilitate the purchase of a reliable vehicle for you from the proceeds of the Mercedes sale, above and beyond the $25,000 loan repayment. Please let me know if these terms are acceptable to you. Sincerely, Bradley. I read the email twice, noting both its substance and its tone. No excuses, no attempts to minimize the situation, no emotional appeals. Just a straightforward business proposal, acknowledging the debt and offering concrete steps toward resolution. Whether this represented a genuine shift in Bradley's perspective or merely a tactical response to financial pressure remained to be seen. But it was unquestionably a step in the right direction. I drafted a careful reply. Dear Bradley, thank you for your proposal, which I find generally acceptable with the following adjustments. Interest on the outstanding loan balance will be calculated at 3% annually, beginning from the date of the original loan. The payment plan must be legally documented with appropriate consequences for missed payments. Regarding the vehicle purchase, I appreciate the gesture, but prefer to select and purchase my own car independently once I receive the initial $25,000 payment. Please have your attorney contact mine to formalize these arrangements. Mom. Short, clear, and maintaining the appropriate boundaries I had finally established. No reverting to the overly accommodating mother who placed Bradley's comfort above my own needs. No emotional reassurances that everything would go back to normal between us. Because normal, our previous dynamic of my giving and his taking, was precisely what needed to change. The next morning, I awoke to a notification from my bank. A transfer of $25,000 had been deposited into my account overnight. The description read simply, initial loan repayment. No accompanying message, no call or text from Bradley explaining the quick action. I stared at my phone screen, momentarily taken aback by the immediacy of the response. After a year of excuses and delays, Bradley had managed to produce $25,000 within hours of our email exchange. The money had been there all along. The willingness to prioritize repayment had not. As I prepared for work, my attorney called to inform me that Bradley's lawyer had already reached out to begin documenting the formal repayment plan. He's moving remarkably quickly, she observed. I take it the financing company's pressure regarding the Mercedes was effective. Apparently so, I agreed. The initial payment has already been transferred to my account. Excellent. I'll review their proposed agreement carefully before you sign anything. But Martha, this is a positive development. Your strategy worked. Yes, it had worked. But at what cost to my relationship with my son? I pushed the thought aside as I headed to the bus stop. The relationship had already been damaged by years of imbalance and taken for granted sacrifices. This reckoning, however painful, was necessary for any healthier dynamic to emerge. At work, I used my lunch break to begin researching used cars online. With $25,000, I could purchase a reliable vehicle outright. Nothing flashy, but something dependable that would restore my independence. The thought brought a smile to my face as I scrolled through listings. Car shopping? Gail asked, peering over my shoulder at my computer screen. Bradley transferred the first repayment this morning, I explained. I'll be able to replace my Toyota sooner than I expected. That was fast, she remarked. Amazing how quickly people find money when properly motivated. Indeed. By mid-afternoon, I'd scheduled appointments to test drive 3 promising options on Saturday. A 3-year-old Honda Civic, a slightly older Toyota Camry similar to my previous car, and a gently used Subaru Forester that offered better handling in winter weather. Each fell comfortably within my budget while leaving a cushion for insurance and maintenance costs. My phone remained conspicuously silent throughout the day. No calls or messages from Bradley or Heather. I found myself both relieved and slightly unsettled by their absence. For years, Bradley had maintained contact primarily when he needed something. Now that I was the one making demands, he had retreated to formal, minimal communication. As I boarded the bus home that evening, mentally calculating how many more bus rides remained before I would have my own transportation again, A text finally came through from Bradley. Paperwork from attorneys should reach you tomorrow. Mercedes has been sold back to dealership at a loss, but it covered the initial payment as promised. Heather is upset, but dealing with it. No inquiry about my day, no questions about what kind of car I plan to buy, no acknowledgement of how this situation had affected me. Still, the practical matters were being addressed, which represented progress of a sort. "Thank you for the prompt payment," I replied, keeping my tone as businesslike as his. "I'll review the paperwork carefully when it arrives." 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing a response, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a message came through. "Mom, I know a financial arrangement doesn't fix everything between us. Can we talk? In person?" I considered this request carefully. Part of me wanted to maintain the emotional distance that had made it possible to stand firm in my demands. Another part recognized that without honest conversation, no real healing could begin. "Yes," I replied finally, "but not at your house. Neutral territory would be better." We arranged to meet the following evening at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. As I prepared dinner in my small kitchen, I found myself oddly nervous about the encounter. What would Bradley expect? Forgiveness? A return to our previous dynamic? Or had he genuinely recognized the imbalance that had characterized our relationship for so long? The paperwork from the attorneys arrived by courier the next morning before I left for work. A detailed repayment agreement outlining the terms we had discussed, with appropriate legal protections for both parties. My attorney had already reviewed and approved it, noting that it actually included slightly more favorable interest terms than I had requested. A small concession from Bradley, perhaps an attempt to demonstrate good faith. I signed the documents and arranged for their return, another piece of the practical resolution falling into place. The emotional resolution, if such were possible, would be more complicated. That evening, I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early, selecting a quiet corner table that offered some privacy without complete isolation. Bradley entered shortly after, scanning the room before spotting me. He looked different somehow, less polished, more subdued. The confident, slightly entitled demeanor that typically characterized his presence was noticeably diminished. "Hi, Mom," he said, taking the seat across from me. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," I replied, studying him more carefully. There were shadows under his eyes, and his normally immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of neglect. A slightly rumpled shirt collar, hair not quite perfectly styled. After ordering coffee, an awkward silence settled between us, a rarity in our relationship. Bradley had always filled conversational space effortlessly, usually with tales of his business successes or complaints about challenges that implicitly requested my assistance. Now he seemed uncharacteristically at a loss for words. "The paperwork looked in order," I offered finally. "I've signed and returned it." He nodded. "Good. That's good." He took a deep breath. "Mom, I owe you an apology. A real one, not just the kind I usually give to smooth things over." I waited, giving him space to continue without prompting or reassurance. "I've been taking you for granted," he admitted, meeting my eyes directly. "For years, actually. I've accepted your help, financial and otherwise, without real gratitude or reciprocation. The car situation just made it impossible to ignore anymore." "Yes," I agreed simply. "It did. When you sold your car to help me last year, I genuinely intended to replace it quickly. Then business improved and expenses came up, and it was easy to keep postponing because you never really complained. You just adapted, like you always do." "Like I always did," I corrected gently. "That's changing now." He nodded, accepting the distinction. "The thing is, when I brought home that Mercedes for Heather, it never even occurred to me how it would look to you. That you'd still be taking buses while she drove a luxury car purchased with your credit. That's pretty terrible, isn't it?" "It was certainly revealing," I acknowledged, "about both your priorities and my willingness to accept them without question." Bradley flinched slightly at the frank assessment. "When the financing company called about your removal from the loan, I was shocked, then angry, then embarrassed. I had completely forgotten you were the primary borrower. That's how entitled I'd become to your help. I just assumed your credit would be there whenever I needed it, without considering the impact on you." "And the gift card?" I asked, referencing the small but symbolic slight that had crystallized so much for me. He had the grace to look genuinely ashamed. "Completely thoughtless. I grabbed it last minute because I was so focused on Heather's reaction to the Mercedes. I didn't put any real thought into what you might want or need or what would show proper appreciation for everything you've done. The frank acknowledgement was more than I had expected, and I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen slightly. Not forgiveness yet, but perhaps the possibility of it taking root. "What happens now?" I asked. "The financial arrangements are in place, but what about everything else?" Bradley looked down at his coffee cup, turning it slowly between his hands. "That's up to you, Mom. I've been doing some serious thinking these past few days about the kind of son I've been, the kind of person I've become. I'm not particularly proud of either. And what conclusions have you reached? That I need to earn back your trust and respect, not through grand gestures or promises, but through consistent actions over time. If you're willing to give me that chance." For the first time in our conversation, I heard the echo of the thoughtful boy Bradley had once been, before success and Heather's influence had nurtured his more entitled tendencies. It sparked a cautious hope that perhaps genuine change was possible. "I'm willing," I said finally, "but things can't go back to how they were. I won't allow that to happen, for both our sakes." "I understand," he nodded, "and I wouldn't want them to." The old dynamic wasn't healthy for either of us. As we continued talking, tentatively mapping out what a more balanced relationship might look like, I realized that my decision to finally stand up for myself had forced a necessary reckoning, not just for Bradley, but for me as well. We had both played roles in creating the unhealthy pattern between us. Now we both had the opportunity to create something better, something built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Whether that opportunity would bear fruit remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful about the possibility. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for test driving potential cars. I dressed with particular care, feeling a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in quite some time. Today, I would take concrete steps toward reclaiming my independence. The Honda Civic was practical and fuel-efficient, the Toyota familiar and comfortable. But the Subaru Forester spoke to something deeper in me, a desire for capability and adventure that I'd suppressed for too long. Its slightly higher price point still fell within my budget thanks to Bradley's prompt initial payment, and the thought of winter drives without anxiety about road conditions was deeply appealing. "You look like you've made your decision," the salesman observed as I completed my third test drive. "I believe I have," I agreed, running my hand along the Forester's sturdy frame. "This one feels right." 2 hours later, I drove off the lot in my new-to-me vehicle, the sensation of being behind the wheel again, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. For a year, I had accommodated the loss of this basic freedom, arranging my life around bus schedules and weather conditions, accepting limitations that had been unnecessary had Bradley simply honored his promise. The Subaru handled beautifully as I navigated familiar streets, its all-wheel drive and slightly elevated seating position giving me a confidence I had forgotten. On impulse, I drove past my apartment building and continued to the outskirts of town, where hiking trails wound through conservation land. I used to walk these trails regularly before selling my car had made them less accessible. Parking in the small lot at the trailhead, I followed the easiest path, marveling at the simple pleasure of spontaneous activity without elaborate planning. Birds called overhead, and the January sun cast long shadows through the bare trees. The cold air filled my lungs, invigorating rather than punishing now that I had chosen to be in it rather than being forced to endure it at bus stops. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. "Did you get the Subaru? How is it?" I smiled, snapping a quick photo of my new car at the trailhead and sending it to her. "Perfect. Taking my first spontaneous adventure in a year." Her response came quickly. "It suits you. Dinner at my place tonight to celebrate?" "I'd love that," I replied, feeling a warm appreciation for this friendship that had deepened during my year of relying on public transportation. Ruth had often given me rides when bus schedules proved particularly challenging, never making me feel like a burden. As I continued my walk, another text came through, from Bradley this time. "How's the car search going?" The question felt like a small but significant gesture, an expression of interest in something that mattered to me, without any reference to his own needs or concerns. "Progress. Already purchased," I responded, sending him the same photo I'd shared with Ruth, a Subaru Forester, perfect for New England winters. "Great choice," he texted back. "Safe and reliable." I'm glad you found something you like. The exchange was brief, but notably different from our typical communications over recent years. No requests disguised as conversation, no subtle reminders of what he'd done for me that might merit reciprocation, no hints about challenges that required my assistance, just simple acknowledgement of a positive development in my life. When I returned to my apartment to prepare for dinner at Ruth's, I found an email from Heather, the first direct communication since our phone conversation about the Mercedes. "Dear Martha," it began, the formality matching the shift in our relationship. "I wanted to reach out regarding recent events. While I was initially upset about the Mercedes situation, I've had time to reflect on the circumstances that led to this point. I recognize that you made significant sacrifices to help Bradley during his business crisis last year, including selling your own vehicle while I continued to enjoy the comforts of our lifestyle. The disparity between your $50 gift card and my receiving a luxury vehicle understandably highlighted this imbalance in a painful way. Bradley and I have had several difficult but necessary conversations about our priorities and the way we've taken your support for granted. We are committed to making changes, beginning with honoring the repayment plan in full and on time. I hope that in time, we can rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than the one-sided dynamic that has developed. I am truly sorry for my role in creating that dynamic. Regards, Heather." I read the message twice, struck by its apparently genuine reflection and lack of manipulative undertones. Whether Heather had composed it herself or Bradley had influenced its content was impossible to know, but the acknowledgement of the imbalance in our relationship represented a significant shift from her previous attitude. At Ruth's dinner celebration that evening, I shared these developments with her and several other friends who had supported me through my year of transportation challenges. "So the Ice Queen actually apologized," Ruth marveled, refilling our wine glasses. "I'm impressed. I'm cautiously optimistic," I acknowledged. "Words are easy, of course. Consistent behavior over time will be the true test." "And how do you feel about all this?" asked Jim, Ruth's brother, who had joined us for dinner. "About standing up for yourself after all this time?" I considered the question carefully. "Lighter," I finally said, "as though I've set down a burden I didn't realize I was carrying. There's some sadness, too, about the years spent in such an unbalanced relationship. But mostly, I feel recalibrated, like I've finally found my proper place in my own life." "To recalibration," Ruth toasted, raising her glass, "and to your beautiful new chariot of independence." We clinked glasses, the simple celebration among friends who valued me for myself, not for what I could provide or sacrifice, feeling more meaningful than any elaborate family gathering where my needs had been afterthoughts. The following week brought more evidence of shifting dynamics. The first scheduled loan repayment arrived in my account 3 days early, accompanied by a simple note from Bradley. "First of many. Thank you for the opportunity to make this right." Heather sent a text inviting me to lunch. Just us, my treat. An unprecedented suggestion that reflected either genuine desire for reconciliation or at least recognition that effort was required on her part. Most telling was the interaction when I drove to Bradley's office to drop off some tax documents he needed. In the past, such errands had always fallen to me regardless of convenience. Now Bradley had initially offered to come to me before I volunteered that I would be in his area. "Nice car," he commented as I pulled into the parking space beside his notably more modest company vehicle, the Mercedes having been replaced by a practical mid-range sedan. "The color suits you." "Thank you," I replied, noting the subtle acknowledgement that I had chosen something that reflected my own preferences rather than practicality alone. "How are things?" "Adjusting," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Heather's still mourning the Mercedes, but she's coming around to the reality check. We're downsizing some other expenses too. Canceled the country club membership, putting the boys in public school next year." "Those are significant changes," I observed, genuinely surprised by the extent of their lifestyle adjustments. "Necessary ones," he shrugged. "The business is doing well, but not Mercedes and country club well, if I'm being honest. I was over-leveraged, trying to maintain appearances beyond what we could genuinely afford." The frank acknowledgement struck me as possibly the most meaningful sign of growth I'd seen from Bradley in years. That can't have been an easy realization. "It wasn't," he agreed, "but it's actually something of a relief now that we're facing it. Living beyond our means created constant pressure that I wasn't even fully acknowledging. Dad tried to warn me about that years ago. The mention of Robert, who had indeed cautioned Bradley about confusing luxuries with necessities, brought a brief but poignant connection between us, a shared memory of a man who had valued substance over appearances. "Your father would be pleased to see you recalibrating," I said gently. "He always believed in building on solid foundations." Bradley nodded, a flicker of genuine emotion crossing his face. "I've been thinking about him a lot lately, about what he would think of the choices I've made, the way I've treated you." "He would have been disappointed," I acknowledged honestly, "but he also believed strongly in the capacity for growth and change. He'd be encouraged by what I'm seeing now." As I drove home from this unexpectedly meaningful exchange, I reflected on the rapid transformations of the past 2 weeks, from the painful clarity of Christmas Eve to the reclaiming of my independence with my new car, to these tentative steps toward a healthier family dynamic, all catalyzed by my decision to finally advocate for myself. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its complications. Patterns established over years don't transform overnight, and true reconciliation requires consistent effort over time. But for the first time, in longer than I could remember, I felt like an active participant in my relationship with my son, rather than a convenient resource to be tapped when needed and overlooked otherwise. That evening, as I drove my new Subaru to the grocery store, a simple errand that had required careful planning for the past year, I found myself smiling at the quiet joy of restored autonomy. The car represented more than transportation. It was a tangible symbol of reclaimed self-worth and the power of finally saying, enough. 3 months passed, bringing the first tentative shoots of spring to New England and a gradually evolving new normal to my relationship with Bradley and Heather. Each month, the loan payment arrived on time, sometimes with a brief note acknowledging the ongoing commitment to making amends. Our interactions had shifted subtly but significantly. More consideration on their part, more honest communication on mine, a slowly rebuilding foundation of mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. The lunch with Heather had been surprisingly productive, if not entirely comfortable. Without Bradley as a buffer, we had been forced to engage more directly, discovering that beneath the surface, tension lay the potential for a relationship based on clearer understanding, if not intimate friendship. "I never really knew you," Heather had admitted over salads at a cafe of her choosing. "I saw you through Bradley's lens, always available, always willing to help, somehow both essential to rely upon and easy to overlook." "And how do you see me now?" I had asked, genuinely curious about her perception. She had considered the question carefully before answering. "As someone with boundaries and expectations, someone whose support comes with conditions of reciprocity and respect." A wry smile had crossed her face. "Someone a lot stronger than I originally thought." It wasn't a declaration of deep affection, but it represented a significant improvement over the dismissive tolerance that had previously characterized her attitude toward me. April brought my 69th birthday, a date I approached with measured expectations. The previous year's disappointment had catalyzed important changes, but wounds healed gradually. I had made plans with friends for a dinner celebration, determined to center my own enjoyment regardless of my family's response. The morning of my birthday, I drove my now beloved Subaru to a favorite hiking trail, relishing the freedom to begin my day exactly as I pleased. The early spring woods were coming alive with delicate wildflowers and the first pale green leaf buds, the air fresh with possibility. I walked for an hour, filling my lungs and clearing my mind, grateful for this moment of solitude, before returning to the world of relationships and obligations. Back home, I found a package propped against my apartment door, a simply wrapped gift with a card from Bradley and his family. Opening it cautiously, I discovered a beautifully crafted photo album, its leather cover embossed with my name. Inside, someone, likely Bradley judging by the handwriting, had created a timeline of family moments, each photo carefully selected and annotated. Unlike generic family albums focusing on holidays and special events, this collection highlighted small, meaningful interactions. Me teaching a young Bradley to bake cookies, reading to infant twins on my lap, helping Melissa through her grief after losing David, celebrating my retirement from full-time teaching. The final page held a recent photo I didn't recognize: Bradley, Heather, and the boys standing beside my new Subaru, each holding a letter that together spelled, "Thank you." The accompanying note read, "For everything you are to us, not just everything you do for us. Happy birthday, Mom." The thoughtfulness of the gift, The time it must have taken to assemble, the reflection required to select moments that mattered to me rather than just to them, moved me unexpectedly. This wasn't an extravagant present designed to impress or compensate. It was a meaningful acknowledgement of my place in their lives beyond what I could provide materially. My phone rang as I was still absorbing this gesture. Bradley's name appeared on the screen. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said when I answered, his voice warm. "Did you get our package?" "I did," I replied, emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. "It's beautiful, Bradley. Thank you." "It was Heather's idea, actually," he said, surprising me further. "She thought you'd appreciate something personal more than anything we could buy." "She was right," I acknowledged. "Please thank her for me. You can thank her yourself at dinner tonight if you're free. Nothing elaborate, just family at our place. The boys have been working on something special." The invitation was casual, without pressure or excessive expectation. "I'd like that," I said. "What time?" 6:30? "And no need to bring anything, just yourself." After hanging up, I reflected on this invitation compared to previous family gatherings where I'd been assigned errands, expected to arrive early to help, or tasked with specific contributions. This simple, just yourself, represented another subtle but significant shift in how they viewed my role in the family. My friends insisted on still taking me to lunch, despite my evening plans, raising glasses to what Ruth called the year of Martha's Renaissance. "You seem different," observed Jim, who had become a regular presence at our gatherings, "more centered somehow." "I feel different," I agreed, like I finally recognized that advocating for myself isn't selfish, it's necessary for any healthy relationship. "Some people never learn that lesson," Ruth noted. "They spend their whole lives accommodating others at their own expense." "I nearly did," I acknowledged. It took that Mercedes with the red bow to finally wake me up. When I arrived at Bradley and Heather's house that evening, the first thing I noticed was the absence of their typically elaborate presentation. No extravagant flower arrangements or formal table settings, just a comfortable family dinner with favorite foods prepared with evident care and attention. "We made lasagna," Tyler announced proudly as he took my coat. "The one from Grandpa's recipe that you taught Dad to make. With garlic bread," added Jason, the younger boy. "And we didn't burn it this time." The easy warmth of their greeting, the thoughtful menu choices, the relaxed atmosphere, all pointed to a gathering focused on genuine connection rather than impression management. I felt myself relaxing into this new dynamic, cautiously optimistic about what it represented. Heather emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Another unusual sight. "Happy birthday, Martha. I hope you're hungry." "Starving," I confirmed, noting the subtle changes in their home since my last visit. Some of the more ostentatious decorative pieces had disappeared, replaced by items with apparent personal significance. Family photos, the boys' sports trophies, books that showed signs of actually being read. "We've been downsizing," Bradley explained, following my gaze. "Part of our overall reassessment of priorities." Dinner was surprisingly enjoyable, conversation flowing naturally, the boys sharing school stories, Bradley discussing business developments without the exaggerated success narratives that had previously characterized his professional updates. Heather seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen her, less concerned with maintaining a perfect facade. After dessert, a simple but delicious homemade cake, the boys disappeared briefly, returning with a clumsily wrapped package. "We made this for you," Jason announced, placing it before me with ceremonial importance. Inside was a handcrafted wooden jewelry box, clearly the product of a school woodworking class, stained and varnished with earnest if imperfect care. "Dad helped a little," Tyler admitted, "but we did most of it ourselves." "It's beautiful," I said sincerely, touched by their effort. "I'll treasure it." "Open it," Jason urged, practically bouncing with excitement. Inside the box lay a set of keys on a silver keychain engraved with my initials. "It's a key to our house," Bradley explained. "We realized you've never had one, even though you're always welcome. The other is a key to a small cabin we've rented on Lake Winnipesaukee for a family weekend this summer. If you'd like to join us, that is." The gesture, both the practical acknowledgement of my place in their family and the invitation to share leisure time rather than just expecting practical support, spoke volumes about the shifts in their perspective. "I'd like that very much," I said, carefully closing the jewelry box around this symbol of inclusion and recognition. As the evening drew to a close, Bradley walked me to my car, the spring air cool but not uncomfortable around us. "Mom," he said hesitantly. "I've been meaning to ask, are you happy with how things are going between us, with the changes we've been making?" The question itself represented growth, Bradley actually seeking my perspective rather than assuming his efforts were sufficient or appropriate. "I am," I answered honestly. "Not because everything is perfect, but because I see genuine effort to create something healthier for all of us." He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "It's still strange sometimes, remembering to check myself, to consider how my actions affect others rather than just assuming accommodation. But it's getting easier. And honestly, I like myself better this way." "I like you better this way too," I said with a smile, softening the candor with affection. Driving home in my Subaru, the vehicle that had become a symbol of my reclaimed independence, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. From that painful Christmas Eve with its $50 gift card and Mercedes' reveal to this thoughtful birthday celebration that emphasized connection over extravagance, we had traveled a considerable distance as a family. The most meaningful gift wasn't the photo album or the jewelry box with its symbolic keys. It was the gift I had given myself when I finally stood up for my own worth, the permission to expect reciprocity, to establish boundaries, to require respect rather than mere appreciation. At 69, I had finally learned what should have been obvious decades earlier, that my value wasn't determined by how much I sacrificed for others, but by the authentic relationships I cultivated, with my family, and perhaps most importantly, with myself. The Mercedes with its red bow had long since been returned to the dealership. In its place had emerged something far more valuable, the beginning of a family dynamic built on mutual respect rather than convenience and obligation. Not perfect, not complete, but growing steadily toward something healthier for all of us. As I parked outside my apartment building, I touched the wooden jewelry box on the seat beside me, feeling the weight of the keys inside. Keys not just to physical spaces, but to a new chapter in our family story, one where I was finally recognized as a person with needs and feelings, rather than simply a resource to be tapped when convenient. It had taken 69 years and one painfully illuminating Christmas Eve to reach this point. But as I carried my birthday gifts inside, I felt nothing but gratitude for the difficult journey that had led me here, to this moment of hard-won clarity and long overdue recognition. 1 year after that transformative Christmas Eve, I stood in my kitchen preparing a simple apple pie to bring to Bradley and Heather's house for the holiday gathering. The familiar rhythm of rolling dough and slicing fruit carried memories of countless previous Christmases, but this year felt fundamentally different from any that had come before. The loan from Bradley had been fully repaid 3 weeks earlier, 2 months ahead of schedule. The final payment had arrived with a handwritten note, debt fulfilled financially, though I can never fully repay what I owe you in terms of support, patience, and love. Thank you for the second chance to be a better son. My Subaru sat in the parking space visible from my kitchen window, still a source of quiet joy and independence. Beyond its practical utility, it represented a watershed moment in my relationship with my son, the point at which I had finally demanded the respect I deserved rather than accepting whatever consideration he chose to offer. The past year had brought gradual but meaningful shifts in our family dynamic. Bradley and Heather had indeed downsized their lifestyle, moving from their showcase home to a more modest but comfortable house in a less prestigious neighborhood. The boys had transitioned to public school, initially resistant but eventually flourishing in the more diverse environment. Most significantly, the pattern of our interactions had evolved from the one-sided giving and taking that had characterized our relationship for so long. My phone chimed with a text from Ruth. "Need a ride to Bradley's tonight?" I smiled at the offer, remembering how often Ruth had rescued me during my year without transportation. "Thanks, but I'm driving. Want to carpool?" "Jim's taking me," she replied, referring to her brother who had become a significant presence in my life over the past months. What had begun as friendly dinners had gradually evolved into something more. Companionable hikes, theater outings, long conversations over coffee. At our age, we moved cautiously, valuing the developing connection without rushing to define it. As I finished crimping the edges of the pie crust, my thoughts turned to the Christmas gift waiting in my bedroom closet, a simple but thoughtful present for Bradley that I hoped would symbolize our new beginning. After much consideration, I had found a first edition copy of The Road Less Traveled, the book that had helped me understand the importance of boundaries in healthy relationships. Inside, I'd inscribed, "For Bradley, with appreciation for the new path we're forging together. Love, Mom." For Heather, I'd selected a luxurious but practical cashmere scarf in a color that complemented her eyes rather than her decor. A personal gift rather than a domestic accessory. The boys would receive custom bookends crafted by Jim for their growing collection of adventure novels, a hobby I had encouraged through carefully selected stories that expanded their horizons beyond video games and social media. These gifts represented my new approach to giving, thoughtful rather than sacrificial, personal rather than merely practical or expensive. They reflected actual attention to the recipients as individuals rather than generic offerings that fulfilled an obligation without genuine consideration. The drive to Bradley and Heather's new home took 15 minutes, the Subaru handling the light snow with confident ease. Their house, though smaller than their previous showcase property, had a warmth and character that the other had lacked. Holiday lights outlined the porch in a tasteful display, and a handmade wreath hung on the front door, one of Heather's new creative projects as she explored interests beyond social climbing. Bradley answered my knock immediately, as though he'd been watching for my arrival. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, enfolding me in a genuine hug. "Need help with anything?" "Just this pie," I replied, returning the embrace before handing him the carefully packaged dessert. "Merry Christmas to you too." Inside, the atmosphere felt noticeably different from previous holiday gatherings. The decorations were simpler, but somehow more meaningful. Handcrafted ornaments mixed with family heirlooms on a modestly sized tree, holiday cards displayed along the mantel, a fire crackling in the fireplace. The boys were setting the dining table, arguing good-naturedly about the correct placement of forks. "Martha!" Heather emerged from the kitchen, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail rather than the elaborate styling she had once favored. "Perfect timing. The roast is just about ready." No air kisses or superficial greetings, just a genuine welcome that acknowledged my arrival as a pleasure rather than a fulfillment of obligation. Another small shift that reflected larger changes in our family culture. "Can I help with anything?" I offered, noting that her response would indicate whether old patterns still lingered beneath the surface changes. "Actually, yes," she said, surprising me slightly. "The gravy's giving me trouble. You always make it perfectly smooth." The request represented yet another evolution. Heather acknowledging my expertise without feeling threatened by it, asking for assistance as part of a collaborative effort rather than an expected service. As we worked together in the kitchen, I observed how she had adapted to their changed circumstances with unexpected grace. The woman who had once required luxury and status as validation now spoke enthusiastically about her community garden plot and the adult education classes she'd enrolled in for spring semester. "I'm thinking of getting my teaching certificate," she confided as we put the finishing touches on dinner preparations. "Working with kids has always interested me, but I got sidetracked by—" She paused, searching for words. "By expectations?" I suggested gently. "Both external and internal?" She nodded, a flash of vulnerability crossing her face. "Exactly. There was always so much pressure to project a certain image, to compete in this invisible contest of lifestyle and status. I didn't realize how exhausting it was until we stepped away from it." The conversation shifted as the boys bounded into the kitchen, eager to show me their latest school projects before dinner. Tyler had constructed a remarkably detailed model of a sustainable city for his environmental science class, while Jason had written a short story that showed genuine creative promise. I listened attentively, noting how their enthusiasms had evolved from the latest electronic gadgets to pursuits that engaged their minds and talents more meaningfully. Dinner itself was delicious, but unpretentious. Comfort food prepared with care rather than showy dishes designed to impress. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from the boys' school activities to Bradley's business developments to my recent volunteer work teaching English to adult learners at the community center. "How's Jim?" Bradley asked as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, his tone suggesting genuine interest rather than perfunctory politeness. "He's well," I replied, feeling a slight warmth in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. "He's spending Christmas with his daughter in Connecticut but will be back for New Year's." "You should bring him to our New Year's gathering," Heather suggested. "We'd love to get to know him better." The invitation, Spontaneous, inclusive, without agenda, touched me unexpectedly. "I'd like that," I said simply. As we settled around the Christmas tree for the gift exchange, I couldn't help reflecting on the stark contrast with the previous year's experience. Then, my carefully chosen presents had been barely acknowledged amidst the excitement over the ill-fated Mercedes, my own gift a hastily purchased gift card that screamed afterthought. Now, we approached the exchange with a mindfulness that emphasized the thought behind each present rather than its monetary value. Bradley handed me a small, carefully wrapped package first. "From all of us," he said, though something in his expression suggested particular significance. Inside was a slim jewelry box containing a silver pendant shaped like a key, similar to, but smaller than the house key they had given me on my birthday. Engraved on the back were the words, "For the woman who unlocked our better selves." "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched by the symbolism. "Thank you." "The key represents more than access to our home," Bradley explained, unusual emotion making his voice slightly rough. "It represents what you taught us this past year, that real family relationships require unlocking honesty, mutual respect, and genuine consideration, rather than just going through expected motions." As I fastened the necklace around my neck, I felt the weight of the pendant against my skin, light physically, but significant emotionally. In many ways, it represented the journey we had taken together since that revelatory Christmas Eve, from imbalance to equilibrium, from entitlement to appreciation, from taking for granted to genuine gratitude. The remainder of the evening unfolded with a warmth and authenticity that had often been missing from our previous gatherings. We played board games that elicited genuine laughter, shared stories that revealed actual connection rather than surface interactions, and simply enjoyed one another's company without hidden agendas or unspoken resentments. When I finally prepared to leave, my arms filled with thoughtful gifts and leftover containers prepared by Heather, Bradley walked me to my car, as had become his custom. "This was nice," he said, helping me arrange packages in the Subaru's cargo area. "Different from last year in all the right ways." "Yes," I agreed. "Though in a strange way, I'm almost grateful for last year's disaster. Without it, we might never have confronted the patterns that needed changing." He nodded, his expression thoughtful in the glow of the porch lights. "Sometimes the most painful moments are the most necessary ones. The Mercedes with the red bow, it seemed so important at the time. Now it just seems like a symbol of all the wrong priorities." As I drove home through the quiet Christmas night, the key pendant resting against my heart, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from that painful previous Christmas, the restoration of my dignity and independence, the recalibration of my relationship with my son, the development of deeper friendships, and even the possibility of new romance in my life. The most valuable gift, however, had been one I had given myself, the permission to matter, to have needs, to expect consideration, rather than mere gratitude for sacrifices made. At 70 years old, I had finally learned to balance loving others with loving myself, a lesson that had transformed not just my life, but the lives of those I cared about most deeply. The Mercedes with the red bow was long gone, but the clarity it had brought remained, a guiding light toward healthier, more balanced relationships that honored my worth as much as my willingness to give. Perhaps that in the end was the greatest gift of all.